Welcome to the Learning Curve of Life podcast. I'm Dana Stovern, author and your host, and I'll be sharing candid insights about conscious living that I've gleaned from over 20 years of my spiritual path and work as a body-based intuitive life coach and money coach. This podcast is the platform to share my offerings of my written word in voice form to inspire and awaken you, entertain and encourage you, provide hope, and a deeper view into more meaningful living. Thanks for being here, and enjoy the words. About ravens, magpies, and border collies. Written April 21st, 2021, Pitkin Mesa, Paonia, Colorado. At the first year anniversary mark of living with COVID-19, I was experiencing one of the most powerful and profound voids of my life. My existing business platform for the magic of somatic money was dying a long death. Bob, my then husband, and I were continuing to practice our quarantine, creating a continued deep lack of community connection. And my spirit team, the Lighted Divine Council I work with, who usually gave me regular guiding updates, had gone MIA shortly after the January 6, 2021 insurrectionist attack on our nation's capital, and was giving me very little informational guidance to work with. I had launched my book, Are You Present in Your Body with Your Money, on sheer faith. It did not help that I was living through another financial low in my life. I was experiencing the least amount of income in over a decade. By spring of 2021, it was clear to me that I was being required to live through one of the greatest voids of my life and do nothing. It was one of the hardest realities to which I've ever had to surrender. This piece was one of my saving graces. Here it is. About a year ago at this time, COVID-19 let the air into the network of humanity's water pipes woven throughout the global house, and a new rhythm sounded. Kunk-kunk-kunk-kunk-kunk-kunk. Our home shook with air in the pipes, echoing the change. As this rattling looseness happened in the greater world, our little neighborhood churned with its own spring changes of wildlife. Deep in one of the ravines leading up to our mesa, the birds made new decisions about pecking orders. Who knows why the Congress of Neighborhood Ravens rumbled with the gang of magpies, but they did. And who knows why the vote tipped in favor of the ravens, but it happened. And the ravens ousted the magpies from their hidden tangled mess of wild fruit trees, Virginia creeper, elm, wild sweet pea, and tamarisk. In one shell-shocked swoop, with black plumage shimmering iridescent emeralds in the sun, the ravens kicked out the tuxedo birds. The magpies, insulted by the takeover, exploded out of the ravine and raged into the neighborhood looking for new homes. Of course, the humans were clueless to this foul drama because, COVID was playing out its air-pocketed jam session in humanity's water lines. Kunk-kunk-kunk-kunk-kunk. It was a ripe day when the magpies arrived. The tonal quality of eerie light filtering from the sun tipped towards a different sky. This light change with a subtle new cliff edge was like a twilighted eclipse at noon. It leaned in, even though the sun, moon, and earth were not collectively hijinksed in light and shadow. The magpies hovered in the air above our yard, a roiling tuxedo-plumaged bird gang pillaging nests from other birds that homed in our great pine trees and the other nearly 40 trees in our yard. They attacked, dumped, and cleared the nests of an entire generation of eggs and fledglings from the trees to the ground. They raucously exclaimed their horrid triumph, wreathed in beautiful plumage, as only magpies do. My husband Bob and I watched in horror, unable to do anything to stop the destruction. At the pinnacle of the pillage, a magpie evicted a bird out of a tree, squawking in chase as the terrified bird smashed into one of our picture windows, a window usually displaying our gorgeous mountain view. Not that day. Instantaneously, the bird fell to the ground, dead, and before I had time to dash out the door and pick it up, the magpie absconded with its body to a nearby tree for dinner. After, Bob and I wandered the yard, stunned that a diversity of birds we'd helped cultivate over the years was wiped out in a single day by angry magpies. This hit close to home because the previous occupants of our home used to sit on the deck and shoot at, most likely, birds. When we first moved in, I dug bullets out of the deck floor and found shell casings underneath the deck. It didn't take us long to understand why our property was so quietly void of birdsong. It was disorienting for us, having fully enjoyed the diverse bird sanctuary we'd created in Durango, Colorado, at our previous cabin. It took 3 years for the birds to fully return to our new property in Paonia. So the magpie's violent eviction was a brutal return to a yard and trees lacking birds and birdsong. My precious flock of cooing doves that used to swirl in the driveway, gone. The robins who joyfully bounced through the early morning dewed lawn for worms, gone. The trilling meadowlarks, they moved off to adjacent fields. The warbling finches vanished. Even the sparrows disappeared. Fortunately, the intrepid hummingbirds persisted, swerving through space and avoiding the bird bullies, and the stealth owls and hawks stuck around as they trumped the magpies in size. As COVID voluminously unfolded and we sank into our quarantine, I grieved the loss of our birds at a time I needed them the most, and we were left with the melodic, rasping squawk of the determined magpie. For several weeks, I was so angry and hurt by the world of magpie justice that I waged war with them. I yelled at them, chased after them, encouraged the dogs to run them down. I threw rocks at them, but it was fruitless. They just mocked me from higher branches. As news trickled through the neighborhood that the ravens had kicked the magpies out of their home, and we began to understand the larger picture, I calmed down. There was a reason for this temporary, heartbreaking insanity of a magpie takeover. In the wake of the destruction, I went to my bookshelf and referred to the sage advice about ravens and magpies by Ted Andrews in Animal Speak. Both birds, of course, are extremely intelligent. Both are rooted from the same family of birds. And what stood out to me about the magpie was their innate ability to scavenge. They clean things out when an old cycle is ending and a new one is beginning. They also hold deep occult magic. I hated to admit it, but the wildlife, like clockwork, was reflecting the symbolic harbinger of the great turning of our times. The magpies, as a universal mirror, just showed my husband and me the great clearing and reset we were beginning to live in our lives on a planet in flux. I spent that summer tolerating the magpies in our yard. It took months for them to relent. Eventually, I came to my own unsettled peace that even magpies need homes too, and they do serve a greater purpose. They were doing what they had to do for their survival while symbolically reflecting the great reset in our lives. And lo, this spring, after a year, more balance is returning to our yard with more birds peacefully coexisting here once again, even with the magpies. I'm heartened that the meadowlark are quite prolific, especially in voice, marking the heightened state of intuitive awakening which is happening in our lives and around the planet. As the bird drama rebalances in our lives, a new universal mirror has also appeared in our neighborhood. A black and white tuxedo border collie, one of the neighborhood dogs. He showed up a handful of days ago, running incessant laps in our neighbors' open fields, running on phantom purpose, running hell-bent for leather along the endless interior of the fence line, running, parrying on turns in the corners of the fields like no other breed of dog does besides a herding dog. He's running and running as nascent green alfalfa pops from the ground, ready for the fresh irrigation water that just trickled in last week. The water sends the entire neighborhood outdoors to work and open the water line, shaking out the dead weeds and clotted dirt from ditches and pipes. This is our annual spring ceremony of the water blessing coming down from the mountains. We are so lucky for this sacred gift of flowing water. As we worked out the water lines, networks of neighborhoods setting up the net of flowing water for the fields, this sweet black and white dog ran circles within the box of green fields. As I watched this scene unfold for the first time during my morning meditation, his heats around the field, his paws barely hitting the earth, it all began to feel familiar. It's as if I knew what he was doing because I, in the hollowed-out center of my core, felt like how he was running. Wrapped in my blanket in the chill spring air at dew point and frost line, holding my mug of tea, the sun readying to burst over Jumbo Mountain, I wondered, what am I looking at? How am I seeing this? What is this universal mirror telling me? When the meaning rolled in, it came as a blow. Oh, Lord, I am looking at my life. I am stuck inside this box of quarantine, and the magpies have cleared out my life for a year, reducing me to as little as possible, and I'm really not able to go anywhere, do anything, or see anyone. The effort to build and recreate out of the rubble isn't quite possible yet. And now I'm reduced to running empty phantom heats, turning in circles inside the box of my own making. The magnetic pull I felt between this dog and his run, and me and my life, buoyed me in sweet sorrow. The phantom laps we're running in our lives aren't quite over, but they can't last forever. Since that morning, I've learned that Tino is a 2-year-old border collie. His owner's older herding dog died, and Tino was meant to learn the herding trade and go to work to herd livestock. For whatever reason, 2-year-old Tino didn't make the connection, and he and his owner did not bond. And so Tino, with the energy of a 2-year-old border collie, runs his heats in the open fields, the neighborhood network of us keeping an eye on him. Even as my heart hurts for the misconnection between Tino and his owner, I can't help but think that in the universal mirror, we're all living along the storylines of these ravens, magpies, and one sweet border collie. We were evicted out of our old lives a year ago, and we were turned upside down. Then our nests and eggs of dreams, rhythms, and projects were repetitively cleared, destructively dumped to the ground, with one old story after another dying in the chaos of a grueling year. Though the new story is trying to arrive, peeking its nascent green tendrils from the earth as we line up the water pipelines to feed the earth with mountain water, it's not all quite connected yet. And so we are running our passionate phantom heats of purpose in our hearts, our souls, like a sweet black and white dog trying to locate his connection, a connection that keeps vaporizing in the heat of the morning sun as his breath, sinew, bone, and blood lightly sail over the earth in his prayer of faith and redemption. You've just listened to an Along the Learning Curve of Life piece with Dana Stovern. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast and also sign up for my newest written releases at www.danastovern.com, or stay abreast of the current work on my Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter channels. And remember, stay curious, stay aware, and let the universe be your tour guide.